Welcome back to the Politics Hour. The MGM Casino opened up last night. Tom Sherwood is our resident analyst. He's a reporter for NBC4 and a columnist with the current newspapers. I know he was not there last night. We'll talk about why. But also joining us in studio is Adam Eben. He is a member of the Virginia State Senate. He's a Democrat representing District 30, which includes parts of the city of Alexandria, Fairfax, and Arlington counties. Senator Eben, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Even if you wanted to go to the opening of the MGM Grand last night, you probably couldn't go because it was so backed up that they had to cut off exits from the Wilson Bridge going over there, so you probably couldn't go. But Tom Sherwood has a reason that a lot of people probably shouldn't go.
Well, I just think one of the issues, I didn't get a chance to do a story on this, but is the gambling anonymous, or the people who have problems with gambling. Maryland has a statewide phone number. The casinos are required by law to caution against gambling. But, the whole point of the gambling casinos is to lure you in. I was going to do a story about people should worry about it. My rule on gambling, I go about once every 3 years to Atlantic City, is gamble with no more money than you would just be willing to throw into the Potomac River. That's what I do, and then it's much more fun. Then you can have fun. But the things are designed to lure you in. Senior citizens with fixed incomes, people stopping playing the lottery and going. Apart from all the glitz, there's a lot of worry, and from me, about what happens.
Prince George's County says that they want it because it's going to be a revenue driver in Prince George's County. As I said earlier, we're joined by Adam Eben. He's a member of the Virginia State Senate, Democrat representing District 30. There are no casinos in the Commonwealth of Virginia, and I suspect that Prince George's County is anticipating a lot of traffic coming from Virginia.
I think they are, and I'm hoping that we remain casino-free in Virginia. Wish them luck, but I know that a lot of times those, particularly electronic games, are lure you into a trance the way they have the technology. And, a huge percentage of the gamblers, of the winnings for the casino come from a small percentage of the visitors.
The Washington Post.
Prince George's County is also looking at 4,000 new jobs being created and a lot of tax revenue.
And many of those jobs in Prince George. And again, that's why it's all a good thing, part of the National Harbor's development. But there's something like the Washington Post reporters did a story. There's something like 50 casinos in the northeastern United States. Now, Virginia has never shown any interest in it. But there are some Indian tribes, federally recognized Indian tribes, that might have a way of opening a casino. What would you think about that?
I'm opposed to casino gambling in Virginia, however it comes. I don't know the federal rules for that. But we have had people who have actively tried to get casino gambling through a committee that I sit on in the Senate, and it's not something I support.
Do you support the state lottery?
It sounds hypocritical. I didn't vote for the lottery. It was before I was in the General Assembly, but that's there, and I accept it.
Alexandria has been debating what will happen to its Confederate symbols. It seems a statue of a Confederate soldier will stay, but Jefferson Davis Highway will be renamed. First, the statue. This would seem to be a local matter, but in this case, the General Assembly would have to be involved. Can you explain?
Sure. In 1889, the General Assembly passed a law saying that the monument shall perpetually remain as it is presently erected and located, and that it cannot be repealed, altered, or revoked by any future city council or municipal authority. So it's up to the state if there was to be any effort to move the statue.
And you and others from the General Assembly representing Alexandria declined to request a waiver to the rules that prohibit moving war memorials, even though the city council in Alexandria voted to have it removed. But why?
Well, to start with, there's no appetite in Richmond to be able to pass that kind of a bill. It would be a symbolic bill, and I don't think the community is united on moving that particular statue.
Well, the law you cited, it can't be moved, altered.
Altered, modified, or changed by any future council or other municipal power or authority. That's the 1889 law, and we've passed similar laws in the 1950s.
And you would have to request a waiver from that law.
But there's a simple solution. This is like what Cuba did with the American embassy in Cuba when they put up a news ticker on the front of the American embassy in Cuba to broadcast news to the people who couldn't get news in Cuba. Fidel Castro put up a bunch of flagpoles and flags on right in front of it, and you couldn't see the news ticker. So why don't you just put up some flags in Alexandria and block it?
Let's just either leave it the way it is or not.
I'm just trying to stir up trouble.
You certainly are. I mean, and I don't think it's trouble. The one thing I'd like to see us do is honor more of the Union side, or particularly African American contributions. In Alexandria, Market Square in front of City Hall was a large slave market, and I'd like to see that more prominently recognized.
I was at
Because the
Antietam.
Confederacy lasted for all of 4 years, and slavery lasted for several hundred years. So
That's right.
It would seem appropriate that you should.
Well, I was at Antietam last weekend on Sunday. We had the
I noticed.
Illumination Day. 23,100 real candles, not fake ones, spread out over the battlefield for the wounded people. 6,000 to 8,000 people, I think, died, and all of those wounded. It brings back the Civil War thing, and I understand the history of Virginia being in the heart of the Civil War battles. It seems to me that we shouldn't move monuments we have, but explain the ones we have better.
Yeah,
And introduce some new ones.
And maybe some new ones. Kojo Monument.
800-433-8850 if you have questions for Senator Eben. Some are not happy about changing the highway's name nor moving war memorials like the Confederate statue. They feel it erases history. Alexandria is soliciting new names for the Jefferson Davis Highway, and the number of people have weighed in. Do you have a particular preference for a name?
sure. Mine's kind of boring. I would just call it Richmond Highway because that's what it's called in Fairfax.
Yeah, a lot of people would like to see it called Richmond Highway. I'm surprised that Sherwood doesn't have a name of his own that he'd like to call it.
I actually think calling it the Richmond Highway makes sense. That's what it is and was and will be.
President-elect Donald Trump has promised that he will shrink the federal workforce while promising to beef up the military. Both federal employees and the military are important economic drivers in Northern Virginia. What do you think a Trump presidency will mean for your district?
Well, for federal workers, and we have a lot of them, and the threat of cuts is challenging, but it's particularly demoralizing, I would think, for a federal worker to work for cabinet secretaries or agency heads who oppose the very mission of their department, to work for the head of the EPA who's against environmental protection, or the secretary of HUD who doesn't support all our fair housing laws. Wouldn't want to make me go into public service, and we have some really talented people from this region, and we'd like them to continue to enter public service.
Well, there have been, back to the Reagan era, the Reagan Revolution, it's been a mantra of the Republican Party to cut the size of government.
Get rid of the education department?
If you can remember which one it is. But it hasn't happened. I mean, there have been cutbacks in the sequestration, which has been terrible for various budgets, including the military budgets. But the growth of the government has occurred with the growth of the country. So I'm just wondering, how fearful should people be if they think their federal jobs are going to be wiped out en masse?
I don't know how quickly something like that could happen en masse, and whether the Senate would go along with particular cuts en masse. So I would keep an eye on it, but this isn't a time that I'd want to go to work for the EPA as a new employee.
Well, so last in, first out, or whatever that phrase is.
Right.
A number of public officials in our region have reported an uptick in racial and hate-based incidents. Are you aware of any increase in Virginia at all?
Yeah, there have been 3 hate crimes that have been reported since the election. I don't have details on all of them. The Southern Poverty Law Center documented one case in Arlington where a woman was crossing the street and reported that 2 young men in a car shouted at her, "Be ready, because with Trump we can grab your pussy." There was a planned Klan rally in Danville, specifically cited to celebrate the election. However, it didn't materialize. So there's not a great climate, but we have a really rich immigrant community in Northern Virginia, especially with Latino and Muslim immigrants, and I want them to feel safe.
Maryland has set up a hotline to report incidents of this kind. What might the response be in Virginia if there is indeed a continuation of an increase in these kinds of incidents?
Well, I have great confidence in our Department of Public Safety investigating things, but the real problem with hate crimes is people who don't report them. People who are fearful or ashamed or don't want to call attention to their immigrant status or otherwise, or just embarrassed.
And also, look what happens on social media now. If you criticize the president-elect or a candidate, or you say something complimentary about the Comet Pizza place, you get bombarded with all kinds of maybe there's some. I'm a big believer in free speech. I'm reluctant to say this, but at some point there ought to be people held accountable for their intimidation.
Well, the problem is it's starting at the top with bullying someone who really, from the top, from the administration, the new president who likes to assert his dominance over everything in any way he can through Twitter or otherwise. It's not really a great example. I mean, at this point, regardless of party, it's one thing to hope for, a good presidency success for the policies you believe in, but I believe the president should be a unifying figure, from just as Ronald Reagan was, not mean-spirited.
Well, Reagan was certainly reviled by the Democrats during that campaign. When that bozo actor, B-grade actor. I mean, and there was a lot of public humiliation of him, an attempt at it.
Well, Trump is making me nostalgic for Reagan.
Oh, that's the news of the day right there.
It looks like there are new details about the future FBI headquarters. It's going to be just one building, not 12 or 14 separate buildings. And if public transportation is a priority, that would point to Maryland over Springfield, Virginia for the project. What are your thoughts about it?
We do have a Springfield-Franconia metro station near the parcel. I don't know the details of how close the Maryland station is to the site, but we would certainly like those jobs in Virginia. I know our federal delegation is doing what they can to get them.
You'd think, Governor Hunt, not Hunt, I keep getting the Governor Hunt mixed up with the governor of Maryland. Hogan. He wants the FBI there, and he didn't support Trump. Maybe you could get Trump to have a hissy fit over this and give it to Virginia just to show Hogan that he should have been more supportive.
I will start tweeting as soon as we leave.
The governor, he's going to be sitting at the Army-Navy game. He's going to have to sit on one side of the field and then the other with President-elect Trump. I'll be anxious to see what they talk about.
It'll be anxious to see if they talk. 2017 means statewide elections in Virginia, including governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general. In the wake of the Donald Trump victory in the election, of course, he did not win Virginia. But what does the landscape look like for Democrats in those statewide races at this point?
Well, I'm feeling pretty good. We just defeated a constitutional amendment that was placed on the ballot as a inducement to get Republicans to vote. It was a right-to-work constitutional amendment, which was not forecast to be defeated, and it lost by an even bigger margin than Trump did. We're the only battleground state that Hillary Clinton improved performance for the Democrats in 2016 over 2012. So those are good signs. That said, it's still an off year, not a federal year, so we have to work hard to turn out our vote. But there's a lot of new energy or renewed energy and revitalization in the Democratic Party. Unfortunately, it's after the election, even though we did, I wish we had seen that nationally. But I go to a local Democratic committee meeting and I find 23 new members. Do
you think that's sustainable? Because people get fired up over an election and where they feel a great deal of anger or worry about it, and then they fade away as the day goes by.
I think President-elect Trump will effectively encourage them to channel their feelings after the election. I think he'll keep it up, unfortunately.
General Assembly session begins January 11th. What's specifically on your agenda for that session?
Well, I'm going to continue my work to pass a constitutional amendment to allow for us to have a two-term governor. I've got some legislation to bring some fairness to consumers in the hot lanes. Right now, when they receive a big bill and are hauled into court, the judges don't have any discretion over their fees from the private contractor who operates the lanes. I'm also working on some marijuana policy changes. The one I'm most optimistic about is to stop taking driver's licenses away from marijuana offenders. All the states were mandated to do this at one point, and more than 33 of them no longer take them away, including every state surrounding Virginia. And I have a Republican co-chief patron in the Senate. There will be a House Republican version of the bill. We're working with prosecutors, so I'm really trying to build a big coalition for it this year.
Have to see if that works out.
Is that a demonstrable number of people who have lost their licenses on marijuana use?
Yeah. They're suspended for 6 months, and
hundreds, thousands?
Tens of thousands. During the 6 months after you get the offense, you have a provision where if you don't choose to plead guilty, you can lose your license, which you would do anyway if you're found guilty.
Adam Eben is a member of the Virginia State Senate. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Tom Sherwood, very briefly, Mayor Muriel Bowser of the District of Columbia met with President-elect Donald Trump during the course of this past week, but we practically know nothing about what was discussed.
She said they had a nice meeting, 40 minutes. There was no photo afterwards, and he didn't come out and talk about the meeting. There's some reports that Mark Seagrave said she may have talked about the RFK Redskins Stadium in the District of Columbia as one item where the president-elect
But
may
why
help.
the secrecy?
Well, I'm going to send another message and
We're
ask.
hoping to have her here as a guest next week on this broadcast. We'll
Can
ask
I
the
say
same
very
question.
quickly, she wasn't obviously for Trump. She's a Democrat, but she says as the mayor of the nation's capital, she has to be gracious with whomever is the president, and that's the right
And
approach.
that's it for the show today. But if you've got holiday shopping lists for kids and teens to tackle, we've got some guidance on books to give to the young readers in your life. Our winter reading list for little ones, teens, and families is up at kojoshow.org/blog. Local author and illustrator Juana Medina, librarian extraordinaire Edie Ching, and Rachel Walker of Reading Rockets have shared their top picks with us so we can share them with you. Check out their suggestions at kojoshow.org/blog. Today we say goodbye to our amazing interns, Danielle Verghese and Prachi Parmar. They actually did all the work on this show. The producers and the rest of us just take the credit for it. But they are amazing, and we wish them all the best. Be sure to meet us back here Monday at noon. We'll discuss the future of two local historic sites. First, a court ruling recently put the brakes on the controversial redevelopment of the Macmillan Sand filtration sites. Then, after several attempts to reinvent the Carnegie Library as an arts venue, the century-old landmark may house an Apple store, among other things. That's all coming up Monday at noon. Until then, enjoy your weekend. Thank you all for listening. Tom Sherwood, you have a good weekend.
I intend to.
I'm Kojo Namdi.